Okay, let's get this show on the road. Certainly hope that more of your classmates join in. Otherwise, I'm not going to be inputting a whole lot of extra credit later. Um, for the usual, I have a PowerPoint for us to discuss. And I unintentionally gave you guys another relatively easy week. So that's kind of nice. I hope you enjoy that. So you should see a poll pop up on your screen. I'm really curious as to what you guys think. So answer that. I'm kind of torn between the two. You know, I've lived in Kansas my whole life, and I know that weather in the Midwest can be ridiculous. But yeah, a lot of you are saying the weather has been lovely and the forecast is more of the same. So I'm definitely on the fence. I would love for it to stick around. I'm kind of surprised that most of you say yes. Maybe I'm too cynical. Maybe that's my lesson today, is to not be so cynical. But either way, we're starting a new week, and today's PowerPoint is brought to you by the color green. I also got really amused by the stock images that were being suggested to use as um, decoration, more or less, for the slides. So please enjoy the random stock images that I selected to fill these pages up. We've got a relatively light week, so we've got a relatively light PowerPoint. This should kind of look all the same, except we'll go over an important note toward the end that is specific for this paper and the next. So other than that, more of the same. Announcements. The papers are coming along nicely. I'll definitely have them done by my 2-week timeline. I'm hesitant to say specifically that I'll have them done before. I really hope I do. I would love to not have to grade over the weekend, but you never know what happens. The universe knows when you have things that you want to get done on a specific timeline, and kind of loves throwing a wrench in things, in my opinion. So yeah, that's kind of it for the week. Not really much else is going on. There's not new stuff, but yeah, we're about 2 weeks out from that second paper being due, so I guess just leave that in the back of your mind. This is the stock image that started it all off. I was kind of amused by the synchronized skydivers. I thought it was so random. But anyway, so I'd like to discuss a couple of things that we went over in the reading and for assignments last week to just drive home those ideas. So last week, the discussion that we had in class and the assignments were geared toward thinking about the response paper and getting us out of analysis mode and into response mode. So the big things from last week are the response strategies, handling opposing viewpoints, entering the larger conversation about your topic, and what types of multi-sided argument strategies there are for us to use. I thought this one was funny too. So, response strategies. When you agree with the original article and the argument that it makes, we tend to use the yes and strategy. And if you need to refer to this PowerPoint later, please do so, because a lot of people miss the yes and question on the quiz. And I think that tends to be the strategy that students use the most. They tend to agree with the argument that their article makes in some way. So if you're uncertain about the yes and strategy, refer to this, email me. But I think most of you will use this, unless you prove me wrong. So the yes and strategy allows us to agree with the original argument, but it gives us an outlet to input our own voice and opinion into the conversation. So this is why on the quiz, I actually pulled a direct quote from the textbook. It says something along the lines of, why should someone read your argument as opposed to the argument that you are responding to? That's where the and comes into play, and that's how we distinguish our opinion, our ideas from the original. we add something new, we make suggestions, something about our argument is different so that people don't just go to the argument that we're responding to. When we disagree with the original argument, the best way to do that for the paper is to identify weaknesses in its claims, warrants, or assumptions, and to offer alternatives. And then when you're on the fence about the topic, you can consider what the argument does well and acknowledge places where changes need to be made, which if the yes and isn't the most popular, that one will be the most popular, I think. Feel free to prove me wrong, guys. So, handling the opposing viewpoint. This is going to be really important, so I suppose get that sponge that is your brain focused on this. I think this is one of the more important points I'm going to make today. So regardless of what strategy you use, you will need to consider the opposing viewpoint of your argument and in good faith. This is the crux of our multi-sided argument, which is what we are writing for the second paper. So when I say that you need to consider the opposing viewpoint in good faith, you need to consider the things that these people would believe, what values they may hold, what evidence they may use to argue against the point that you are making. For these topics, we are not assuming that people disagree with us just because like they are bad or they hate things or not really sure what else, but we don't want to assume that people disagree with us just for the point of disagreeing or just to be a-holes about it. So we need to think about what they would think. And ways that we can include that in our paper include summarizing and using direct quotes from sources that would come from people who have an opposing viewpoint. So we talked about last week how we're going to start incorporating sources, a minimum of 2. So one of these sources can be one that attests to what the opposing viewpoint to your topic might think. And the key thing about discussing the opposing viewpoint in these response papers is that you need to discuss it, and then you need to identify places where maybe it's wrong or maybe it doesn't address the issue fully. Somehow you need to take the opposing viewpoint and redirect the focus of the conversation to your point. So we're going to do some activities this week that engage with thinking about the opposing viewpoint. So like I said, if you need to refer to this, do so. If you need to email me, do so. I made the note here, this isn't a stock image, but I had to include a picture of our favorite old white rhetorics dude. Because when we think about entering the larger conversation, Kenneth Burke's parlor metaphor that I talked about in class last week that was in the textbook is a really good one to consider how we as students, as newcomers to the conversation, can put our foot in the door and get our voice heard. So you need to be familiar enough with what's going on both sides of the argument. Another reason that addressing the opposing viewpoint is so important. This adds greatly to your ethos and demonstrates to your audience that you are understanding of all of the aspects that go into the argument. And yeah, it's our favorite old white rhetorics dude. Multi-sided argument strategies. So we've got summarizing, rebutting, and conceding. And these strategies, I think, can be used in different ways in the same paper. They can be used exclusively in one paper. The choice is really up to you. However you think you can convey your argument the best. So, lost my train of thought for a moment. Anyway, when we start summarizing the opposing viewpoint, we can account for what they might think in broad terms and just make statements about what these people would think. Summarizing doesn't tend to be quite as strong as rebutting or conceding because using information directly from people who hold opposing viewpoints or sources that write about these opposing viewpoints is just generally stronger. So in doing so, we can rebut or concede those points. When we make rebuttals, we identify claims, assumptions, and warrants that we agree with, and we argue how those are wrong or how they are misrepresenting the issue as a whole, or how they perhaps don't account for every aspect of the issue. It can be various things that you latch onto to identify how something isn't as great as the idea that you are putting forward. And then with rebutting, as I said on the last slide, you need to find a way to direct the conversation back to your own point. You make your claim about how a point is wrong, is insufficient, and then you offer your alternative as something that is a better solution, or whatever the case may be. And conceding is a little bit different. When you concede a point, you acknowledge where the opposing viewpoint makes a good argument. And it can be the way that we direct the conversation back to our own opinion can be a little similar to what we do with rebutting. When you concede a point, as I said, you make a statement about where the opposing viewpoint has a good idea, has a good belief. But then you find a way to direct the paper back to your point. And that can be something along the lines of acknowledging that this point is good, but doesn't cover the whole issue, acknowledging that it's only a half solution, so on and so forth. So now that we've kind of reviewed last week, we're going to look ahead to this week. So as I said, we're going to be entertaining the opposing viewpoint a lot in the next rest of the semester. So the first introduction that you have to doing that is the believing and doubting game. And this assignment is, in my opinion, one of the more important assignments that we'll do for this module. Think of it as kind of the invention activity from last module. It's designed to give you a good foot in the door on what your opposing viewpoint's going to think and how you're going to respond to it. So, as with the invention activity, please take this one as seriously as possible and give your best faith effort into completing it, because that'll make things a lot easier on you as you start drafting your response paper. So, when you play the believing and doubting game, you need to assume two perspectives in a way. You need to have one side that is agreeing with your opinion, with the statement claim that you're making. And you need to adopt another perspective that disagrees with it. And this can be kind of hard to do because it requires a lot of critical thinking. So yeah, I'm like going ahead of myself on my slide. And now I lost my train of thought. So it can be difficult for students to entertain these two perspectives about their topic because they tend to get very comfortable with believing in their own opinion. So taking a step back and thinking about where your opinion may have some weak points, where someone may disagree with it, is not inherent. So I think the instructions on this assignment go into more depth about how to participate in this game. I believe it's the assignment due for tonight, but we'll check. And it gets, like I said, it gets your brain, gets the gears turning on how to think about your opposing viewpoint and how to incorporate it well into your paper. If you have questions about the believing and doubting game, please email me, let me know. Maybe later in the day I'll be a little bit more articulate and loquacious. And then for Wednesday, you're going to do another developing your logos activity. So for Wednesday, you'll need to create a working claim thesis that responds to the original argument in some way by agreeing with it, disagreeing with it, or qualifying it. You need to make reference to the original article specifically, hint, hint, wink, wink. And then you need to have your own way of pushing the conversation forward in a new direction, whether that's the yes and of making suggestions, offering solutions, whether that is disagreeing with completely and going in a whole new direction. Some way that needs to be present in your thesis. And then for the rest of the activity, you'll be asked to think about what reasonings you have for making the claim that you make, and then how you'll address the opposing viewpoint. So I think good assignment to get kind of a bare bones skeleton of this response paper that is approaching us a little bit faster than maybe we would like. So for this week's extra credit, I'm encouraging you guys to just brainstorm a little bit on your position on the article and what the opposing viewpoint might think. So I would like you to, in the chat, briefly state your position on the article, and it needs to be a little bit more specific than I agree or I disagree. And then to consider a reasonable opposing viewpoint for it. These responses don't have to be extremely well thought out or polished. I'm just wanting you guys to throw something out so that we can start giving ourselves a direction for this believing and doubting game that is on our doorstep. So take a moment in the chat to jot down some ideas, like I said, about the position that you're going to take on your article, what someone else might think about it. And then I've got a couple of prompts at the bottom of the slide that can maybe direct your thinking if need be. Give you another couple moments or so. I'm seeing some great things coming in. This should really help out with the assignment that's due tonight, because you'll have to entertain these thoughts in a little bit more depth. So here before 10 a.m., you already have a bit of an idea of where you can go for this assignment, and that'll be great. Yeah. So I think we can move on, but if you haven't gotten your response in yet, be sure to do so that I can give you your extra credit. And I want to make this note because this came up in this class last week. So I can't stress enough that I highly encourage you to write the response paper over the same article that you wrote the rhetorical analysis over, because it will be the easiest thing for you to do. You don't have to, though. If you would like to use a different article and respond to it, I must approve of the article. So some things that I would be looking for is that it is argumentative, that it comes from a reliable source, that it's published within like the last 10 years or so, recent enough. Yeah, those are the kinds of things that I would be looking for. But either way, if you want to use a new article, you need to send it to me by Wednesday. I must approve it. As I made note of, that's non-negotiable. I can't grade your assignments on an article that I don't know what it says, to kind of give you my rationale for that. And if we get so far to the paper and someone uses an article that I haven't seen to write their paper on, it will receive a failing grade. Because like I said, how can I grade a paper on an article that I don't know anything about? So just food for thought. If you're wanting the easiest thing to do, that would be use the same article. If you would like to use a different article, send it to me by Wednesday for consideration. I don't want to see any articles on marijuana, guns, or college athletes being paid. Just throwing that out there. Those topics are way overdone. So here's the week ahead. And I knew that I was right. The believing and doubting game is due tonight. I made note on that slide. I don't think I said it specifically, but maybe I did. The believing and doubting game can be one that students have difficulty with just because adopting that doubting persona isn't something that we are used to doing all the time. So throughout the day, if you're working on it, having issues with it, please let me know. Many of you know that I hardly ever get up from this chair in front of my computer. So I can pretty much guarantee that if you email me a question, I'll be able to get back to you before midnight tonight when the assignment is due. The good news is that the reading is really brief. Like, I think my reading quiz has 3 questions on it because I didn't really know what else to ask without being ridiculously redundant. So that's nice. I told you guys that the reading from last week would help us out going ahead. So, totally lost my train of thought again. Work hard on these assignments, and then if you get them done, at a decent time, you might have yourself another relatively easy week in this class, which is nice because we're on the doorstep of our would-be spring break. We're already in week 6, guys. Like, flying through this semester. So are there any questions, comments, concerns, revelations, epiphanies, problems, anything of the sort? You can either unmute and ask or say so in the chat. I'll give you a couple minutes, but if there's nothing, we can all leave Zoom.
Is our response paper, are we going to start working on it, so to speak, in a couple weeks, like not this week or next week, but the following week?
So these assignments this week are, I think with the logos activity I said, we're kind of developing a skeleton. So we're kind of there in terms of crafting the ideas of the paper. You're going to be entertaining your own thought and thinking about how you're going to respond to the opposing viewpoint tonight. And that is absolutely critical to the multi-sided argument that we're creating for this paper. So that's definitely a big part of it, and we're starting there. And then that logos activity, it's going to ask you to create a tentative working claims thesis and then start giving some reasons to back it up. So you're going to be starting to, like I said, having very general points that you're going to talk about in your paper. And then next week, we'll start filling those in. So does that answer your question, Stephanie?
Somewhat, yeah.
Okay. Do you still have a question? Well, feel free to ask.
No, I get what you're saying because obviously we did that with the rhetorical analysis paper.
Mhm.
So I can see how it's going to be created, you know what I mean? But I spent extra time on the rhetorical analysis, so I'm kind of in my mind like, okay, when can I squeeze in extra time to put more effort towards it?
Sure.
Um, and just trying to time that, I guess.
Hmm. I would suggest that after Wednesday, that's kind of when your best window of opportunity to devote some extra time to it would be. Because after Wednesday, after I get that assignment graded, you'll have, like I said, your major points that you'll discuss in your paper. Um, Next week is when I'm going to start asking you to find secondary sources. So you can begin to consider that over the weekend if you would like to. And that can be a good, like I said, opportunity for you to start getting some thoughts on paper. I hope that helps.
Yes,
If
it
it
does.
doesn't, if it doesn't, just send me an email. I can go over it in more depth with you. Is there anything else? Tanner, just hold on after the Zoom session ends for a moment, okay? I think with that, we can, wave goodbye, leave. See you next week. Good luck on the assignments, guys. You're welcome, Stephanie. I'm not sure who this is.
Hello.
Hi, Tanner. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm very confused as to who ITAC checkout is.
I'm not too sure either because I don't imagine that's one of your students, is it?
No, don't recognize that from the roster. But stranger things have happened. What can I do for you, Tanner?
Well, I mean, not that I was intending on it, but I ended up joining the Zoom a few minutes late and I just saw other people putting stuff in the chat and I just wanted to make sure like I didn't miss anything that was going to help me or
Yeah.
excuse me, sorry, anything like useful that I should like at least like brainstorm on or
Yeah, so we can go ahead and do a brainstorming real quick. I'm gonna just make a note to myself in the chat that you and I are having this tiny little brainstorm, and I'll give you your extra credit. So what I
Okay.
asked your classmates to do was to just say to me or tell me in the chat. Wow, words today. Tell me in the chat what their position on their article is going to be, and then what a potential opposing viewpoint would be. So don't remember what paper you or what article you wrote on.
I was doing the GameStop article.
Okay, so yeah,
Or like
feel
I
free
guess
to brainstorm with me a moment. What would your position on that argument be?
well in the article I think the author was Emma Bowman. She was talking about